And right now, all eyes are still on US protests, and there are very much pressure on police reform. But what's the stand from President Donald Trump on the calling for US on police reform? Right now, we have Kun Nat Bunnak joining us for this story. So what's the latest with the pressure on police reform?
Recently in the Congress, the Democrats have proposed a bill to reform the police department in the United States after weeks and weeks of protests against racism as well as police violence. So the proposed bill would make it easier to prosecute the police for misconduct, using excessive force, as well as the use of racial bias in policing. This comes after the Minneapolis lawmakers vowed to defund and disband the city's police force for the killing of George Floyd, as well as to build a new public safety system.
Okay. And what's the detail of the bill?
Okay, besides the racial profiling issue, the Justice in Policing Act of 2020 forces the police to use body and dashboard cameras. Chokeholds are also banned, as well as to eliminate no-knock warrants. No-knock warrants means that the police can raid without prior notice, and it also limits the sale of military weapons to the police. But most importantly, the most important part of the bill is that it gives the Department of Justice the authority to investigate police for bias and misconduct. The bill would also create a database of complaints against the police, which is called the National Police Misconduct Registry. However, the bill does not call for defunding the police departments.
Okay, but the process in passing the bill is not going to be something easy. As you know, that the US police are protected a lot by their unions, which are very powerful and have a lot of political connection, especially with the conservative Republicans. So this is going to be a hard fight in Congress.
Sure, definitely a very hard fight here to actually reform the police departments here. But there's some interesting response from both President Trump as well as his opponent, Joe Biden. So both President Trump as well as Mr. Biden rejected the idea of disbanding and defunding police departments over the anti-racial protests. President Trump actually pledged to maintain funding for the police departments, and he will be considering ideas of policing in a much more gentle fashion. He also said that 99% of the American police were great people. So this quote might be a little bit controversial, but that is his response.
It should be a surprise because a lot of leading police officers are staunch supporters of President Trump.
Definitely, as well as Joe Biden's side. The spokesman of Mr. Biden's presidential campaign also opposed the movement to defund the police departments, but they really supported the idea of the police reform as in a sense of emergency, the urgent need to reform such departments. Interestingly, Mr. Biden also visited the family of George Floyd in Houston yesterday, and the lawyer of that family, who is Benjamin Crump, he also said that Mr. Biden really listened and felt their pain, and everyone can feel that sort of compassion, and that really meant the world to this grieving family.
Yeah, that's really important at this very juncture, is it someone to express sympathy and compassion for the family of George Floyd.
Definitely.
Which is so different from President Trump.
We can see a big difference between the way President Trump reacted to the protest or even the whole situation. But with Mr. Biden, he actually went and talked to the family and really felt their pain here. So maybe something for the presidential election.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think both of them have their eyes on the upcoming election. And there's no question about that. Yeah.
So every move must be calculated.
Definitely.
And with the media right now, they are in controversial stage, isn't it? Especially on New York Times, what happened with op-ed editor.
It's a big controversy here because the opinion editor of the New York Times he has resigned after publishing an article that sparked massive outrage from the public. And the article was called "Send in the Troops." "Send in the Troops" was by the Republican Senator Tom Cotton, which fully supports President Trump's idea to send the military forces to curb the anti-racial protests. This sparked a big controversy to a point where even the journalists from the New York Times went on strike.
That's right.
It was that intense. Moreover, more than 800 employees also signed a letter denouncing the article's publication, saying that it really contained misinformation.
No, in fact, the editor, the publisher himself also admitted that the contents of this particular article fell far short of the standard of the New York Times. And what is more important is that it looks like the article was not vetted or filtered before it was published. So it contains a lot of alleged misinformation and nuances that were seen as supporting the use of violence against the rioters. So that's basically one of the reasons why people were so outraged by the publishing of this article.
Definitely.
But it's op-ed page. Do editors have freedom to choose whatever article that they like to publish?
So as the op-ed page editor, Mr. Bennett has all the authorities to, you can use the word censor, but to be on a much more polite term is to filter or to sort of tone things down a little bit. But he admitted that he did not even have a time to look at this particular piece of commentary. So that's why it came out the way it was originally written by this Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, who is a staunch ally of President Trump and was in full support of using the military to crack down on what they see as rioters.
Yeah.
But for this article, stating that it was written by the Republican senator should be a big alarm bell that maybe we should actually review before it gets published in the papers.
No, because and New York Times also received big batsmen from the other side too. That being a media outlet, you should be liberal enough. To allow ideas or views that do not conform with your own to be published, right? To be media, you should have space for a wide range of opinions. So, censoring or trying to fight fault with this kind of article in this very critical time is certainly is an issue that many people may not buy in with the stand taken by the New York Times editors.
Yeah, and the stance from President Trump is very interesting because he doesn't really like New York Times, but this time he said, oh, the newspaper published very good article.
It seems like President Trump and New York Times always has something.
Yeah.
Some sort of conflict, even like a few years back and up until today, we can always see there's some sort of conflict until this article that is definitely from the Republicans.
Okay. Thank you very much, Khun Nat.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Khun Nat keep us updated on police reform and the controversial issue over an article on op-ed page of New York Times.